Imagine you're sitting in a cozy room, the flickering firelight casting a warm glow, and a story from afar begins to stir your heart. Have you ever wondered if a tiny moment could change an entire continent? Today, I want to share with you a morning in Abuja, where the sunlight stretched across marble floors and an unexpected event turned the world's gaze. It was the moment Steve Harvey, the beloved talk show host of millions of Americans, unwittingly stepped into a historic showdown, not on an entertainment stage, but in a tense African conference. Once upon a time in a corner of America, Steve grew up through tough days, dreaming of bringing laughter to every home. But across the ocean in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, a young leader, carried the weight of war and hope for his people on his shoulders. Then, one day, at the international conference in Abuja, their paths crossed. When Nigeria's president, Adetokunbo, with a confident smile, publicly mocked Traoré, no one expected that moment to ignite a spark of inspiration across Africa. In the next 30 minutes, you'll discover 3 precious insights: the power of courage under pressure, lessons of change from young voices, and how each of us can contribute to history even without realizing it. But this story isn't just about Steve or Traoré, it's about you. Have you ever thought that a small action of yours could spark something grand? Before we dive into the details, let's step into this journey together from a tense conference to waves of change across Africa. If you're curious, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment with the word change if you believe we can make a difference. I promise you what you're about to see will make you believe in your own power. Let's get started, because every story is a chance for us to write history. Imagine you're sitting in a cozy living room, a cup of tea warming your hands, when a story from halfway across the world starts to unfold on your screen, pulling you right into the heart of the action. That's the feeling millions of Americans felt one sunny morning in Abuja, Nigeria, as the International Conference Center buzzed with energy. The marble floors gleamed under the morning sun, banners proclaiming "Unity through Prosperity" hung proudly, and delegates from 23 African nations filled the ornate chairs, their voices blending into a symphony of French, English, Arabic, and local dialects. It was meant to be a day of diplomacy, a celebration of an African renaissance, but beneath the surface, old rivalries simmered, ready to boil over. And then, in the midst of it all, an unexpected showdown took the stage. The day began with the usual pageantry. A children's choir singing the African Union anthem, prayers from religious leaders and economic ministers, flashing optimistic PowerPoint slides about trade. But the real drama ignited when Nigeria's president, Adetokunbo, stepped to the podium. At 67, with over 2 decades of rule under his belt, he carried an air of authority, his gold-trimmed agbada a symbol of his seasoned power. His laugh, loud and theatrical, had long been a tool to disarm challengers. Across the room sat Ibrahim Traoré, the 34-year-old president of Burkina Faso, a striking figure in his understated brown suit, flanked by just 2 modest security officers. No notes, no entourage, just a quiet confidence that seemed to hum beneath the surface. When Adetokunbo's gaze landed on Traoré, with a subtle pointed remark, the air thickened. No one expected what would happen next, a young leader rising to meet a veteran's challenge, turning a moment of tension into a historic clash. To bring this closer to home, think back to the 2020 Trump-Biden debate in the U.S. What started as a political showdown unexpectedly drew 73 million viewers, sparking nationwide conversations about leadership and truth. Similarly, this Abuja moment, though continents apart, promised to captivate a global audience, blending personal courage with political stakes. For me, having watched countless viral moments unfold, this felt like the beginning of something big, a spark that could light up a movement. The little lesson here wraps around you like a warm hug. Sometimes the most unexpected moments are the ones that set the stage for greatness. You never know when a single act of bravery can shift the tide. And for Traoré, this was just the start of a journey that would reveal his strength. So as we leave this tense opening scene, let's dive into the roots of Burkina Faso, the burdens that shaped Traoré's resolve, and uncover the fire that drives him. Stay with me, because the heart of this story is about to unfold. Imagine you're sitting beneath an ancient tree, the gentle breeze whispering tales of a distant land where every speck of red dust carries a story of resilience and hope. That land is Burkina Faso, a small nation in West Africa where Ibrahim Traoré grew up and found the fire that led him to the conference in Abuja. To understand why he could stand up to Adetokunbo with such confidence, we need to go back to the tough days that shaped him, days when his country bore burdens that seemed insurmountable. Burkina Faso, meaning land of upright people, endured decades of French colonial rule, leaving deep scars on both body and spirit. When independence arrived in 1960, its people dreamed of a bright future, but instead they faced poverty, political instability, and relentless outside interference. By 2022, the situation worsened as terrorist groups roamed freely, controlling up to 60% of the territory, according to a BBC report from June 2025. Children like Acha, orphaned by conflict, grew up in makeshift shelters, while farming families like Amadou's in Ziniare struggled with barren fields and soaring food prices. The government at the time was criticized for corruption and helplessness, eroding the people's trust. Amid this chaos, Ibrahim Traoré, a 34-year-old captain, stepped forward to lead a coup in September 2022, promising freedom and sovereignty for his nation, despite knowing the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. To bring this closer to home, think of the revolution in Tunisia in 2011. When a street vendor set himself on fire to protest injustice, that spark ignited the Arab Spring, where young people rose up for change. Similarly, Traoré's action wasn't just a coup, it was the voice of a generation seeking to break free from colonial shadows and build a future. For those who love stories through video, this is a testament that from great hardships, courageous leaders can emerge. The little lesson here feels like a warm hug sometimes to understand someone we need to look at the burdens they've carried. The challenges Burkina Faso faced aren't just their story. They're a reminder that strength is often forged in adversity. And for Traoré, those days shaped his resolve. So as we leave these roots behind, let's step into the challenge from Adetokunbo, a critique that will test Traoré's courage. Stay with me, because this story is about to reach its climax. Imagine you're sitting in a warm room, the crackling fire blending with the whisper of a tale from afar, where a powerful voice rises both authoritative and challenging. That's the atmosphere that filled the international conference in Abuja on that fateful morning as Nigeria's president Adetokunbo stepped up to the podium, his eyes gleaming with the confidence of a man who had ruled for over 2 decades. The marble floors sparkled under the early sunlight, and the hall brimmed with delegates from 23 African nations. But all eyes turned to him, a 67-year-old leader, his gold-trimmed agbada, a symbol of his seasoned power. His loud theatrical laugh echoed like a declaration ready to face anyone bold enough to challenge his vision for African leadership. Adetokunbo began his speech with familiar diplomatic words like, "We are not separate nations, but one African family united for prosperity and progress." At first, the audience nodded politely, but as he shifted to the topic of leadership experience, his voice grew stronger, like an actor commanding the stage. He praised Nigeria's role as Africa's most populous nation, with abundant oil wealth, and subtly criticized younger leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, labeling their governance as the impulsiveness of youth. With a sly smile, he said, "Leadership is not a hobby for the restless young. It's a sacred duty that demands decades of preparation, patient learning, and the institutional memory that only comes with experience." His gaze briefly swept over Traoré, an action that seemed casual but carried a sharp edge, thickening the tension in the room. Then he went further, openly mocking Traoré. "Look at our young friend from Burkina Faso, a captain who crowned himself president through a coup. How could he grasp the weight of leadership?" Scattered laughter followed, tinged with unease, as if the audience sensed a fuse had been lit. To bring this closer to home, think of the time Russian President Vladimir Putin criticized Ukraine in his 2014 speech, calling them politically inexperienced. Those words weren't just an attack. They were an attempt to assert his dominance on the global stage. Similarly, Adetokunbo wielded his experience like a shield, aiming to overshadow Traoré, a young leader with a different approach. Having followed many political events through video, I see this moment as a battle of wits, where Adetokunbo sought to cement Nigeria's status as Africa's giant, unwittingly opening the door for Traoré to shine. He recounted his years of hardship coups, economic crises, international sanctions as proof of his maturity, but those words also revealed a self-satisfaction that could be his Achilles heel. Yet many often stumble by assuming experience always equals wisdom. Adetokunbo might have believed his age and power would eclipse Traoré, but he overlooked that today's audience, especially Africa's youth, is no longer swayed by eloquent words without action. The little lesson here feels like a gentle ray of sunlight. Sometimes confidence rooted in the past can blind us to the need for new change. For Adetokunbo, this challenge was a test, but it also kindled the latent strength within Traoré. So as we move beyond this self-assured challenge, let's step into Traoré's unexpected response. A voice of truth that will shake the entire hall. Stay with me, because this story is about to turn an emotional corner. Imagine you're sitting in a quiet room, the soft golden glow of a lamp creating a warm ambiance when a calm yet powerful voice rises like a gentle breeze, strong enough to stir the entire space. That's the moment Ibrahim Traoré stepped onto the stage at the international conference in Abuja after being publicly mocked by President Adetokunbo. The air in the hall grew thick with tension, all eyes fixed on Traoré, a 34-year-old man in a simple brown suit with no notes, no aides, just a quiet confidence that seemed to hum beneath the surface. When Adetokunbo paused, leaving his provocative question about Traoré's leadership hanging in the air, no one anticipated that this moment would turn into a seismic shift of ideas. Traoré rose, his movement slow and deliberate, as if he had been preparing for this moment all along. Traoré's response wasn't a hasty rebuttal or an outburst of anger. It was a carefully crafted voice of truth, rich with depth. He began by turning Adetokunbo's question back on itself. When you speak of experience, whose experience are we discussing? When you speak of institutional knowledge, whose institutions are we preserving? His voice was warm and unhurried, yet each question struck like an arrow at the system Adetokunbo represented. Traoré argued that some systems aren't worth preserving that experience in accepting injustice, might be a hindrance rather than a strength. He shared personal stories of burying children killed by terrorism, sleeping in villages without electricity, while leaders lived in palaces, and listening to mothers explain why they'd rather risk death crossing the Mediterranean than stay in their homeland. With historical examples like Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, and Nelson Mandela, young leaders who bravely reshaped the world. Traoré asserted that youth and independence weren't weaknesses, but the strength to dismantle and rebuild. To bring this closer to home, think of Malala Yousafzai's speech at the United Nations in 2013, when the 16-year-old girl faced those who once threatened her life to demand education. That small voice shook the world, much like how Traoré, despite his youth, silenced the Abuja Hall. Having followed many historic moments through video, I see Traoré's response as proof that truth, when spoken with courage, can overcome prejudices about age or power. He didn't just defend himself, he challenged an entire generation of old guard leaders, opening a new dialogue. Yet many often stumble by thinking an emotional outburst will prevail. They shout or dodge instead of reasoning. Traoré chose to confront with calm, turning the challenge into an opportunity. The little lesson here feels like a warm hug. Sometimes truth doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be spoken with steadfastness and compassion. For Traoré, this moment was a turning point where he not only defended his honor, but also ignited hope across Africa. So as we move beyond this powerful voice, let's witness the immediate reaction from the hall, a moment that will shift the atmosphere and shape the future. Stay with me, because this story is about to turn an emotional corner. Imagine you're sitting in a quiet room, the gentle flicker of a candle casting a warm glow, when suddenly you feel a shift in energy, like when a crowd holds its breath before a pivotal moment. That's the atmosphere that filled the international conference in Abuja right after Ibrahim Traoré delivered his powerful speech. Following Adetokunbo's sharp criticism and Traoré's unexpected response, the air in the hall seemed to freeze, every eye glued to the slightest movement of the two leaders. Then, in that silence, a solitary clap rang out like the first drop breaking a still pond, and gradually the room erupted into applause, mingled with surprised whispers. The reaction from the hall wasn't just an emotional outburst, it was a turning point, unfolding in real time. As Traoré stepped down from the podium, delegates from smaller nations began approaching him, shaking hands and engaging in lively conversations as if he had opened a new door for them. Meanwhile, Adetokunbo, who had once dominated the room with his confident laugh, now sat quietly, his face hardening, his eyes betraying a flicker of confusion. Journalists scribbled furiously. Cameras panned quickly to capture every detail, from the shy smiles of young diplomats to Adetokunbo's growing isolation. A BBC Africa reporter later wrote, "In just 20 minutes, Ibrahim Traoré shifted the gravitational center of African political discourse." The conference's atmosphere had transformed from a diplomatic gathering into a debate about the future of African leadership. To bring this closer to home, think of the moment Barack Obama won the U.S. presidency in 2008. When the results were announced, millions poured into the streets, cheering and crying, not just for the victory, but for a new hope. Similarly, the reaction in the Abuja Hall from silence to applause reflected a collective awakening where the audience recognized that a young leader could reshape perceptions of power. Having followed many events through video, I see this moment as a small flame beginning to spread, igniting the spirit of those who had been overlooked. Yet many often stumble by underestimating a crowd's reaction. They assume silence means agreement, when it might signal deep reflection. The Abuja Hall proved that a brave moment can tip the balance of power. The little lesson here feels like a warm hug. Sometimes the greatest change begins with small, sincere reactions from the crowd. For Traoré, this moment marked his first victory, paving the way for a broader wave of influence. So as we move beyond this turning point, let's step into the social media firestorm, where Traoré's voice continues to echo and awaken a new generation. Stay with me because this story is about to spread farther than ever. Imagine you're sitting in a cozy room, the soft glow of a bedside lamp illuminating old books, when suddenly your phone chimes, signaling a story spreading across the world through a tiny screen. That's the feeling that swept through the evening of June 25th, 2025, just hours after the international conference in Abuja, as Ibrahim Traoré's speech began stirring social media like a storm. Within 2 hours, edited clips of his confrontation with Adetokunbo flooded Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram with the hashtag Traoré Speaks, quickly climbing to the top trending spot across Africa. Traoré's voice didn't just echo in the hall, it reached the hearts of millions of young people, igniting a movement no one saw coming. This firestorm wasn't just a social media trend, it was the voice of a generation. Young Africans from Lagos to Nairobi shared the clips with passionate comments like, "Finally someone said what we've all been thinking," or "This is what real leadership looks like." Viewing parties sprang up at universities where students debated every word of Traoré's speech, while parents sent the video to their children with messages like, "Learn to stand up for what you believe in." International media, such as CNN, International with its segment, New Generation of African Leadership Challenges Old Guard, and BBC with a documentary on the generational divide, amplified the story, racking up over 2 million views in just 24 hours according to X data as of this morning, June 25th, 2025. This wasn't just a viral moment. It was a digital revolution where youth asserted their right to be heard. To bring this closer to home, think of the hashtag Black Lives Matter movement in 2020 in the US. When George Floyd passed away, millions took to social media sharing videos and organizing protests, sparking a wave of political and social change. Similarly, the response to Traoré reflects the power of youth uniting through digital platforms, turning a speech into a collective voice. Having followed many movements through video, I see this moment as proof that social media isn't just entertainment. It's a weapon for a new generation to challenge old power. Yet many often stumble by underestimating social media's strength. They see it as a fleeting fad. In reality, it can shape public opinion and force leaders to act. The little lesson here feels like a warm flame. Sometimes your voice online can spark changes bigger than you imagine. For Traoré, this storm was evidence of widespread support, opening the door to deeper shifts in Nigeria. So as we move beyond this digital wave, let's explore the internal reckoning within Nigeria, where pressure is reshaping the landscape. Stay with me, because this story is about to delve into real change. Imagine you're sitting in a cozy room, the soft golden glow of a lamp spreading across familiar walls, and you hear whispers from a distant community facing profound change. That's the feeling that filled the hearts of Nigerians in the days following the international conference in Abuja, as Ibrahim Traoré's speech not only stirred social media, but also ignited a flame of transformation within the nation. After the social media storm with the hashtag #Traoré Speaks, the atmosphere in Nigeria grew tense, where pressure from the people and internal forces began to test President Adetokunbo's authority. This isn't just a story about a leader, it's a tale of a nation confronting itself. This internal reckoning began as Traoré's video spread, awakening the consciousness of Nigerians. Civil society organizations released a joint statement saying, "President Traoré has voiced concerns shared by millions of Nigerians, rarely expressed by their own leaders." University students organized screenings, sparking heated debates about leadership accountability, while opposition parties wove Traoré's criticisms into their messaging, accusing Adetokunbo of letting the country become the poverty capital, with over 80% of goods imported despite its agricultural potential. Adetokunbo, who once commanded the hall with confident laughter, now found himself isolated. Private meetings were canceled, and he faced tough questions from the press about poverty rates and migration. Having followed many power shifts through video, I see this moment as a sign of a deep awakening within Nigeria. To bring this closer to home, think of the political crisis in Brazil in 2016, when President Dilma Rousseff faced waves of protests and impeachment over corruption scandals. Similarly, the pressure on Adetokunbo didn't just come from Traoré, but from Nigerians themselves weary of empty promises. Activists faced harassment, and the government tried to remove videos from social media, but this backfired, fueling the movement further. For me, this is proof that when people unite, no force can hold them back. Yet many often stumble by viewing internal pressure as mere noise. They overlook the power of collective discontent. In reality, it's the driving force for change. The little lesson here feels like a warm flame. Sometimes confronting oneself is the first step toward building a brighter future. For Adetokunbo, this pressure was a wake-up call, and for Nigeria, it opened a door to transformation. So as we move beyond this internal reckoning, let's explore the global ripples where Traoré's vision begins to shape African leadership. Stay with me, because this story is about to reach farther than ever. Imagine you're sitting in your favorite armchair, the soft evening sunlight filtering through the window, and you hear the gentle waves of a distant ocean. Small ripples, yet enough to reshape the shore. That's the feeling that swept across the world in the weeks following the international conference in Abuja, as Ibrahim Traoré's speech not only stirred Nigeria, but rippled out across Africa and beyond. After the internal reckoning within Nigeria, Traoré's vision began to shape a new kind of leadership, where young leaders like him challenge old rules and ignite hope for an entire continent. This isn't just one man's story, it's a wave of change the world is starting to notice. Traoré's influence stretched beyond borders as international organizations and scholars invited him to share his perspective. Harvard's Kennedy School of Government extended an invitation for him to lecture on leadership in the era of global interconnection, while Oxford's African Studies Center hosted a symposium on new paradigms in African governance. But even more striking were the shifts in regional policy. The debate over the CFA franc, a currency controlled by France, which Traoré highlighted in his speech, now took center stage in Francophone African nations, with serious discussions about monetary independence gaining traction. France, growing uneasy about its economic influence, labeled this dangerous populism, yet couldn't halt the tide. Having followed many movements through video, I see this moment as proof that a powerful idea can shake even the mightiest forces. To bring this closer to home, think of Nelson Mandela's impact after his election as South Africa's president in 1994. His victory didn't just end apartheid, it inspired civil rights movements globally from the US to Europe. Similarly, Traoré's vision emphasizing independence and accountability is encouraging young leaders in Mali, Niger, and Kenya to rise, demanding control over resources and an end to Western dependency. Negotiations over gold mining in Burkina Faso, where foreign companies once held sway, now demand greater local benefits, signaling a real shift in the balance of power. Yet many often stumble by underestimating regional influence. They assume an event only affects its immediate area. In reality, it can trigger a domino effect worldwide. The little lesson here feels like a warm breeze. Sometimes a new vision can shape the future, even when it starts from a small corner. For Traoré, these ripples are the foundation for a lasting legacy. So as we move beyond these global waves, let's step into the lessons for the future, where Traoré leaves a mark, not just for Africa, but for the world. Stay with me, because this story is about to close with profound meaning. Imagine you're sitting on a porch swing, the soft morning sunlight gently caressing your face, and a deep tale from afar draws to a close, leaving you with a warm glow and a surge of belief. That's the feeling Steve Harvey carries as he reflects on his journey from the international conference in Abuja to this very day, June 25th, 2025, when Ibrahim Traoré's voice has become a flame illuminating all of Africa. After the global ripples and the internal shifts in Nigeria, Traoré's legacy isn't just in his powerful words, it's in how he inspires a new generation and invites each of us to shape the future. This isn't just a leader's story, it's a call for all of us to continue writing history. Traoré's legacy began to shine as he turned words into action. After the conference, he launched a fund to support education for Burkina Faso's orphans, aiming to build 10 schools by the end of 2025, raising over $1 million from international donors, according to an update on his official website this morning, June 25th, 2025. Young Africans ignited by his spirit have organized hundreds of online workshops to discuss economic independence and responsible leadership. In Nigeria, inspired youth activists formed the Youth Change Movement, attracting over 50,000 members in just 2 weeks per X data as of 1100 a.m. today, June 25th, 2025. Having followed many movements through video, I see this as proof that a small action can spark a mighty wave. To bring this closer to home, think of the Malala Fund, where Malala Yousafzai, after her iconic 2013 speech, built an organization supporting education for millions of girls worldwide, turning personal pain into community strength. Similarly, Traoré doesn't stop at words. He's creating tangible change from schools to policies, encouraging young leaders to follow suit. American audiences who adore inspiring tales have embraced this message with over 3 million YouTube views of the conference video in the past month alone, according to YouTube analytics. Yet many often stumble by thinking success is just a moment they stop after reaching a goal. Traoré shows that true legacy lies in perseverance. The little lesson here feels like a warm ray of sunshine. Sometimes our legacy isn't fleeting fame, but the small actions we continue to plant each day. You don't need to be a leader, just start with a good idea. For Traoré, this journey not only healed him but inspired the world, including you and me. So as we close this story, ask yourself, what legacy could your words and actions leave for tomorrow? Reflect and share your thoughts, because this story doesn't end here, but begins new journeys for you. Thank you for joining me on this moment,